The phone rang again. It was my mother for the 5th time that evening. She had been calling to ask about my arrival time. I was on my way home by train, returning from a month-long break granted by my office. It was 6 p.m., and my train was scheduled to arrive at 8 o'clock. I had been eagerly looking forward to this trip back to my hometown, but what struck me as odd was how excited my mother seemed this time. It wasn't like her to be so anxious about my arrival. I thought maybe she had just missed me. At 8 o'clock, I finally stepped off the train and made my way to the house. The door swung open to reveal my mother, a warm smile on her face. "Oh, my dear son, you're finally home," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. I hugged her tightly, a feeling of comfort washing over me. We walked into the living room, and I sank onto the sofa, exhausted from the long journey. "Mom, can you bring me a glass of water?" I asked, but instead of going to the kitchen, she sat beside me, still smiling strangely. "Your water is coming," she said in a soft voice, before the door opened and a young woman, maybe 22, entered the room, holding a glass of water. She seemed nervous and uncomfortable. I thanked her quietly, noticing how my mother's eyes lit up when she saw the girl. "This is Lucy, our new helper," my mother announced. I nodded. "Welcome, Lucy." "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice a little shy. Then my mother suddenly interrupted. "Oh no. Don't call him sir. Just call him Peter. He likes that." Smiled. "Yes, please just call me Peter." After that, we all sat down for dinner. Lucy went to the kitchen for some more work while my mother leaned in to whisper, "Lucy's going to stay with us. Poor girl lost her parents last week and has nowhere else to go. I decided to help her," she explained. I nodded, feeling sympathetic. "That's so kind of you, but do you really know her family? I mean, it's a bit unusual, don't you think?" "I've known them for years," my mother assured me. Later that night, after a long conversation, I headed to bed. The next morning, I woke up to find that Lucy and my mother had prepared my favorite breakfast. My mother sat beside me, but Lucy remained standing, looking rather shy. "Come, Lucy, sit with us," my mother urged. Lucy hesitated before sitting down next to me. I took a closer look at her. She had blue eyes just like mine. For some reason, I felt a strange connection. As we ate, I thought about going to the market to buy Lucy some new clothes, but my mother interrupted. "Peter, I'm feeling really tired today. Can you go with Lucy instead?" I hesitated, unsure of why she seemed so eager for me to spend time with her. "Sure, I can go with Lucy," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure about the idea. My mother smiled brightly. "Lovely. You two can spend the day together." We went to the market, and Lucy picked out a few dresses. I helped her pick the best ones, noticing just how much we had in common. Afterward, we stopped at a coffee shop and talked for hours. She shared her life story and I told her about mine. I didn't realize how much I had enjoyed our conversation until it was time to leave. By 6 p.m. we were back home. I expected my mother to be upset that we had spent so much time together, but instead she was thrilled. "Maybe you should take Lucy to the park tomorrow," she suggested eagerly. Something felt off. There was a strange air around my mother, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than I understood. Before dinner, I sat down with her and asked, "Mom, can you explain what's going on? You've been acting differently lately. Why do you want me to spend so much time with Lucy? What's going on in your mind?" "Peter, I know what you're thinking," my mother said, her voice calm but firm. "But believe me, I really care about Lucy. I don't want her to feel like just a maid. I want her to feel like she's a part of this family." I stayed silent. It was clear now. My mother wanted to make Lucy a part of the family, and I realized the only way that could truly happen was if she became my wife. Thank me, Lucy baked my favorite cake. After enjoying it, we headed up to the terrace to spend some time together. It was a special moment, filled with laughter and conversation. Then, for a brief second, our eyes locked. The silence between us felt different, like everything else had faded away. Lucy looked stunning in the soft glow of the moonlight. I gently took her hand in mine, and she smiled. "What a beautiful night," she whispered. I returned to my room afterward, but sleep eluded me. All I could think about was Lucy. From the very first day there had been a connection, but now I knew it was something deeper. I was in love with her. I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. I had to tell both Lucy and my mother. My mother would be overjoyed, I thought, since she'd been encouraging this all along. The next morning I went out to buy a ring. I also set up a special arrangement in the backyard, decorating with lights and flowers. My mother had no idea what I was planning. I figured I'd tell her later. That evening I took Lucy into the backyard. Her eyes sparkled with joy when she saw what I had prepared. Without saying a word, I knelt down, pulled out the ring and proposed. Tears welled up in her eyes as she shouted, "Yes. Yes, yes, yes." At that moment, my mother appeared in the doorway. She froze when she saw the ring in my hand and Lucy standing before me. I was just about to slip the ring onto her finger when my mother screamed, "What is all this? What are you doing, Peter?" I chuckled nervously. "I'm going to marry Lucy, my first love. And this is what you've been wanting all along. Believe me, Mom, I'm the happiest man today." "What nonsense!" My mother's voice was sharp with disbelief. "You can't marry her. Are both of you out of your minds?" Before I could say anything more, she fainted. Lucy and I were stunned, completely caught off guard. I rushed to get a doctor. After a thorough checkup, the doctor explained that my mother had experienced a panic attack. He advised me to avoid causing her any more stress. When my mother regained consciousness, I entered her room to check on her. Lucy didn't join me. She was too frightened by the whole ordeal. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" I asked softly. "Yes, my son," she replied weakly. "Then why did you react like that? You were the one who encouraged me and Lucy to grow closer. Why are you against it now?" My mother's face turned grave. She hesitated before answering. "Peter, I know I encouraged you to spend time with Lucy, but I never wanted you to marry her. And I will never give you my permission for that. Forget about your feelings for her." I shook my head, feeling my heart sink. "Oh, Mom, I love Lucy with all my heart. She's my first love. And she loves me too. You've liked her so much, so why are you stopping us? Please understand." But she didn't respond. She simply closed her eyes and turned her head, signaling the end of the conversation. The next day, as I returned from the market, I noticed some unfamiliar faces in the house. A young, beautiful woman and an older lady were sitting with my mother. I greeted them and sat beside my mom. "This is my friend's daughter, Alex," my mother said, a proud smile on her face. "Isn't she beautiful? I have chosen her as my daughter-in-law," my mother declared. "What?" I shouted in disbelief. "No, this can't be happening." I turned to the two ladies sitting with my mother, and in a fit of anger, told them to leave the house immediately. My mother was furious. "How could you disrespect my guests like that?" she scolded. "How can you even think of marrying me off to someone else?" I asked, my voice trembling with frustration. "You know I love Lucy." "I've already told you, Peter, you can't love Lucy," my mother replied coldly. "But why?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "Please give me a reason. Can't you see the pain in my eyes?" My mother's face softened, but her words were firm. "I can't give you a reason now. It's not possible. You have to give me a reason," I said, my anger flaring. "Or I'll take Lucy and marry her without your blessing." Tears filled my mother's eyes. Peter, my son, I love you so much. I can't lose you. I don't want you to hate me. If you want to know the reason, then wait for my death. In that moment, I was consumed with rage. Then die, Mom, I said before storming out of the room. I immediately regretted those words, but the damage had been done. From that day on, I refused to speak to my mother. She grew weaker and sicker with each passing day. Months went by, and I heard that my mother had arranged for Lucy to marry someone else. I tried to stop the wedding, but after witnessing the toll it had taken on my mother, Lucy agreed to marry the other man. My mother cried every day. The doctor said she had only a few days left to live. One evening, as I was returning home, I saw a group of people gathered outside my house. Fear gripped my chest. A man stepped forward and told me that my mother had passed away. I rushed inside, only to find that she was gone. Felt like I had lost everything. That was the worst day of my life. The day after my mother's funeral, I went into her room. I found a letter lying on her desk. It was addressed to me. Trembling, I started to read it. Peter, I know you hate me, but I couldn't tell you the truth. If you had known, it would have made you hate me even more. I never hated Lucy. In fact, I loved her like my own daughter. I wanted you to treat her as a sister, not as a lover. But now it's time for you to know the truth. Please don't hate me for what I've done. I was against your marriage with Lucy because she is your real sister. You and she share a blood bond. I adopted you from a very poor family when you were just a child. I'm not your biological mother, but I have loved you as my own. When Lucy's parents died, I decided to take her in as well. It was a mistake, Peter, and I regret it deeply. I'm sorry for everything that has happened. Please forgive me, my son. Even in death, I will continue to love you. Please don't hate me. I couldn't believe what I had just read. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. What was I supposed to do now? What had been my mistake? What had my mother done wrong? I couldn't think straight. Now I was left with no mother, no sister, and no lover. What was I supposed to do? Can anyone tell me?